The other big one was Laremy Tunsil, as I mentioned earlier. You know, I understand. Like when you draft a very good quarterback like CJ Stroud, you have to circle dates on the calendar when things are going to get tough. Um, and from an accounting standpoint, they are going to get tough in the next year and a half, right? Like Josh Allen's deal, massive, by the way. Congratulations, Josh Allen. Um, One of the best two quarterbacks in the NFL, two or three. Um, and he's paid like it. And CJ Stroud has an opportunity to prove that he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, maybe not best two or three, but he can make up a lot of ground next year. Um, and it's going to be time to pay the piper there. And when it's time to pay the piper there, you're also going to have to pay Will Anderson. You're going to have to pay Derek Stingley. There's a lot of decisions you have to make. And if you are going to let Tunsil walk, who I think you owe 21 next year, and he's going to want an extension, like, let's get something for an elite left tackle who still, by every metric in the book, other than like penalties, is one of the best in the game. Like he's still locking people down in pass pro. I think part of the issue is he's supposed to be the lead dog on that offensive line, and that offensive line was terrible last year. Now, part of it was possibly the coaching. They let the offensive line coach go. They promoted from within the assistant offensive line coach. They have let Bobby Slowick go. They have a new offensive coordinator. The problem remains the offensive line was terrible. And so you might think you walk into that room and you say, hey, you come from like a place where you say, hey, who do we keep? You know, that's sometimes a lot more simple a conversation. And it would stand to reason that you would walk into that room and say, hey, yeah, we keep Laremy Tunsil. But when you look at what they got for him, 2025 third, seventh, and a 2026 second and a fourth, and you save $14 million in cap space, 42 in cash over the next 2 years, like it's not the worst thing in the world. I know it's not going to sit well with some people who are like, like look at the team on the other end of this. When you have a great rookie quarterback on a rookie deal, you invest in the protection of said quarterback. Well, one team's doing that and the other is saying, hey, we got to take this risk here because we got to pay so many people, including that quarterback, soon. And they're ahead of the Commanders on this timeline. So, like, they've got to do this. This is a math deal. I also think there might be more to it internally. I don't want to speculate, but like it just feels like a thing where maybe um, things got stale. And part of that is the unit was terrible last year. And I know like heavy is the head that wears the crown. Sometimes you get blamed for things that aren't your fault. And sometimes when you have 19, 20 penalties in a season and you're not publicly accountable for those things, like, and if you talk to certain Texans fans, they might say, well, I didn't hear him taking accountability for those penalties or the issues up front or that sort of thing. Like, I think eventually you become a little bit more expendable. Now, I think he's going to make the Commanders very happy in this thing. I think he's a hell of a football player. And Laremy Tunsil's a guy that I've always had a soft spot for in my heart. And it's not, it's not because he smokes pot. It's because, like many other people do, it's because he got so fucked over for like when you think about what actually cost him tens of millions of dollars and changed the trajectory of a couple of franchises there. I mean, it's the dumbest thing in the world.
The
Fast
dumbest.
forward a few years from now, they don't even test for it anymore.
Right.
Essentially, I mean, I know they kind of do, but like the guy got absolutely fucked over early in his career for doing something stupid at the time in the context of what the norms were in the league, but not harmful to anyone
Mm-mm.
except maybe himself. That was a lot. The gas mask thing, I've never tried that. Um, I'm pretty sure he just slept it off. But the whole thing is, he's a guy that I always want to do well. I think he's a great football player. He in some ways can be one of the most forgotten elite tackles in the NFL. Like we often talk about, rightfully so, Lane and Trent Williams and people like that. And we talked about Tyron Smith before he kind of came back down to earth and age got him and injuries got him. Um, People like that, Penei Sewell, but this guy is one of the elites. And now the Commanders have an elite tackle to protect Jayden Daniels, who they believe is an elite quarterback. I do too. But again, lots of penalties last year. And that Texans offensive line, if you include the postseason numbers, 65 sacks. So it's kind of a reset button thing. So who plays left tackle? I'm not really sure. Like it could be Fisher. It could be any one of these guys that are already on the roster. Like they had to shuffle a lot of people over the last couple of years. Um, I know that Nolan, you said that the draft class at tackle is not like elite, maybe, but I think
Yeah,
for me,
that's what it sounds like.
I think for me, if you've got a guy like CJ Stroud, I don't care if you have to overpay a little bit or reach, you have to fill this spot. Whether it's somebody on the roster or somebody in the draft, like you just cannot go into the season without feeling good about this spot. So even if you have to draft a guy in the second who you had as a three, something like that, like you have to have a starting caliber tackle coming out of this draft or somebody in the building, and hope for the best of the group. That the offensive line coach was a huge problem last year. That sometimes can be it, you know. And I think for the Commanders, it's a huge move because if you remember at the end of last season, Cosme got hurt, really good guard for them. He's going to miss a lot of the season. This year, you can slide Coleman in to guard. He's the rookie from TCU last year who did an admirable job in there at tackle, can bounce around. He can play guard for you. Tunsil at tackle, obviously. You still have Wiley, Biotish, who's a really good player at center. It really turns into a decent group. Allegretti playing the other guard, and then when Cosme comes back, you can actually move Allegretti to a depth piece, or you'd have maybe a guard trade chip at some point in the season because guards, um, they get hurt in the NFL, and sometimes there is a demand for those guys. But I think more than anything, like, hey, how do you beat the Eagles? Well, one of the ways is you got to block the pass rush. And so I'm not saying it's a completely, Eagles centric move. Like whether you're in the NFC East or not, you want a dominant left tackle to protect your franchise quarterback, especially when he's young on a rookie deal. This is what you do. You go all in. Um, and it is kind of ironic though that Houston, who was in this mode a year ago, is shedding probably the first thing you think about that you want when you have a quarterback on a rookie deal, but the math is the math uh, when it comes to the Texans.
Yeah, the math is the math, and I think it does get into an interesting question too. Um, I just wonder if internally the Texans look at the changes they've had to the group they were excited about last year. Now you have a new play caller offensively in Nick Caley. Tank Dell just had an additional knee surgery last week to repair his ACL. He had the other torn ligaments repaired the first surgery. Now he's doing the ACL. That resets his return to play clock. So you don't know when you're going to have him. They trade for Christian Kirk. He's only played 20 games in 2 years. So really, your only certain commodity at receivers, Nico Collins, and so I think with that, you mentioned the accounting, which I think is a big piece of it, and it's also the question of, hey, our offensive line was not good enough last year with Tunsil,
Right.
so now we look at, hey, the cupboard might be kind of bare for CJ this season. Maybe this is the time we make this change, both from an accounting perspective and to get some assets that we can kind of replenish the skill spots.
You also think about, hey, like since the Commanders are signing elite um, tackles, what are the Eagles doing at edge? Because these two teams are going to be. I'm not quite on the Chris Brockman train on the Rich Eisen show. My boy Chris, who had such a ridiculous take that it prompted a "Come on, bro" from Rich Eisen. Rich Eisen. I've never heard Rich Eisen. Eisman is his new name. Rich Eisen. I've never heard Rich Eisen say, "Come on, bro." But Brockman was like, "Yeah, the Commanders are the team to beat in the NFC now." It's like you got to hold your horses. I've done this. I did this last year with the Texans. I was like, "Hey, next year they're going to be, that team." to outright say that they're the clubhouse leaders is a little bit rich, but they are going to be a tough team to beat. And especially when you look at the Eagles losing all these guys on defense, right? I mean, we can go through that in a second, but like one of the places where I'm really interested in what they're going to do is edge because they lose Milton Williams. I mean, forget about the fact that they've lost now Isaiah Rodgers, CJ Gardner Johnson, which we'll get into in a second. Bradbury as well, who's an important kind of personality in that room probably this year. Um, you know, they haven't really addressed the edge. You know, Milton Williams is gone, and that's one less dog up front, right? Like Josh Sweat heads to Arizona. They have lost some dudes defensively in Vic Fangio's group. So I'm kind of wondering who the edge guy is going to be. You know, I think it's going to be either Trey Hendrickson or it's going to be Joey Bosa. You know, Trey Hendrickson via a trade or Joey Bosa, you know, might be the simplest. Um, you know, it's going to take no capital to pick him up off the street. I mean, he just got cut by the Chargers. He's still got some juice in him. Listen, the last time the Eagles rolled out a Caucasian edge rusher on third down, they won the Super Bowl.
Let's go.
So I think that's a move you got to make. One of those two moves. Or you could talk Sam Hubbard out of retirement. One of the three. Anyways, I just want to see what they do at edge. You know, after the Commanders make this move, it's not like exactly an arms race, but it is interesting to me.